Remember when I was reading books about 18 year olds, we were like, oh my god, they're so old, and now it's like, oh, those young little babies. Hello and welcome to another video. My bum is sore. Oh, my leg's losing feeling. So obviously it is the start of a new year, which means it is also the start of a new month, which means it is also the end of an old month, because that's just how months and years work. So today we are going to be doing a little December reading wrap up. I honestly pretty proud of how many books I read in December. I thought that I wouldn't read many, like in my TV I only picked out 6, and that's how much I read in November, so I thought it would be about the same. And this month I actually ended up reading like 9 or 10 books, which I'm really proud of because it's been a few months since I've actually read that many books, since I've been getting out of my reading slump. So I used to like read 9 or 10 books every month, but just since I've been a bit more slow going, so I was very happy that I read these many books. Obviously, like, I did do a 24-hour reading challenge this month, so it makes sense that I read like a lot of books because I was read straight for 24 hours, so obviously I was going to get through books reading that. But either way, I'm very proud. We actually did complete the TBR that we set at the beginning of the month, so I'm very happy with that. We did not manage to do that last month and we did it this month, so that's very good. But as you can see, I've got quite a stack of books ahead of me, so let's not take too long with this. As always, grab yourself a nice warm or cold drink depending on your preference, and let's just get on into this video. This month was a pretty good reading month. I feel like November, I did have some books that I just wasn't the hugest fan of, because I think that's just a side effect. I forced myself to read through all the books in my TBR, so some of those books are books I've had for like 2 or more years, and over those 2 years my reading taste will have changed a lot, so it makes sense that there will be books that maybe when I bought them, if I'd have read them immediately, I would have enjoyed them a lot more, but now 2 years later I'm just not the biggest fan. So yeah, like I said, I read 9 books this month, so that was the 6 books that were on my TBR that we set at the beginning of December, and then 3 other books outside of that. So we're going to go through them in chronological order. Okay, so the first book that I've read this month took me so long to read, but to be fair, I mean, look at the size of it. It's 700 pages, I believe, and it's like a big size paperback. This was the last book in the Book of Dust trilogy that I started last month. I really enjoyed this trilogy. The ending, like, I'm still hung up over it. It was the very first book I read this month, so it's been like a month since I read it, and I'm still hung up over this ending. The ending isn't an ending. The book just stops. And not stops in that there's going to be a next book trying to leave a cliffhanger away. The book just stops. I read a review of the book, and the reviewer said that I actually really like that, because in the first books you have, it gets neatly tied up, everything gets resolved. In the first books the main character is a child, so when you're a child you think about the world very black and white, everything is solvable, everything's fixable. When you become an adult, which the main character is in this book, you kind of realise that some things just go unfinished and you can't always tie everything up with a nice little bow. So I guess in that aspect, if that was intentional at least, and not just that person reading into it too much, then at least that aspect I would say that that is pretty cool, because that is kind of realistic. But at the same time, we don't read books for realism. You know what I mean? I would like things to be tied up in a nice little bow, because it doesn't happen in real life. Why can't it happen in books? But either way, I just really enjoyed this book. I really like Philip Pullman's writing. I do think it's a very distinct type of writing. I don't think it's for everyone, because I do think it's very different than romantic or fantasy books that are getting published today, but I really enjoyed it. I gave this 3.5 stars. Probably would have been higher if the ending had been wrapped up nicely, but as it is, I was worried we would have a romance between our main character Lyra and Marcus. Is that his name? I've already forgotten. Malcolm. Between our main characters Lyra and Malcolm, and luckily we didn't, because there's a 10-year age gap between them, and I just wasn't a huge fan of that. I'm not really a big age gap person, so that didn't happen. But then by the end, because I'd been thinking it would happen, I was almost disappointed. So I really don't know what to think about this book, but I did enjoy it, and honestly I would recommend the trilogy. And no, I think Philip Pullman just has a way with words and stories, and especially if you like adventure stories, so stories that cross multiple countries, where the main character starts off one place and ends off in a completely different place, goes on a journey between them, and I mean a physical journey, not just like a mental journey. They do both. Then Philip Pullman is definitely for you, but I really liked it. This was a good book to start the month, despite the fact that it's like huge. The next book that I read this month was Throttled by Lauren Asher, which is in the first in her Dirty Air series. So I was really looking forward to reading this book, and it did not disappoint. I'm now realising I gave this a 3.5 stars, but considering I gave The Book of Dust a 3.5 stars, I definitely like this book more. So this is honestly probably a 4 star. I was maybe just too harsh with it when I first read it. That happens sometimes where I go back and I change the rating after, either lower it or bump it up. So a lot of my books, like, I'll finish them and have a certain rating, but then maybe like 2 months later I'll have changed the rating. But that's okay, it's my opinion on them, so I get to change it however I want. But as I was saying, I really like this. I obviously love F1, so there was not really a doubt in my mind that I was gonna like it. But the first half, before they got together, I wasn't as invested, but then in the second half, as soon as they ended up together, I fell in love. I was giggling, I was kicking my feet. I love Noah, our main male character. He is down bad for Maya, and I absolutely love that. Yeah, the first half I did just feel it took me a while to get into, and I do think that was maybe partially because I read The Rosefield just before, and that is a very literate book. Like I said, Philip Pullman has a very distinct style of writing that isn't like modern books, and then this is very much like a modern book, and I believe this was one of Lauren Asher's first books, and I feel like you can tell in the writing style of it, and it is very like first book vibes. But as soon as the main couple got together, I was obsessed. I loved it, and I will be continuing this series, which is Interconnected Standalones, so hopefully I will be reading one of them this month, which I cannot wait for. Yes, this was a 4-star read for me. It's honestly just like, it's not very long. I think it's like 330 pages. Yeah, it's about 340 pages, so it was just a really good book to like, what's the word, a palate cleanser. There we go. It was a really good palate cleanser, especially for me as someone who doesn't read a lot of romance. It was a good book to read in between, like especially after such a heavy fantasy book. It was good to read like a lighter, fun romance in between to kind of take a break and like let my brain relax a little. Okay, so then next up, I finished the second book in the Codesbreaker trilogy, A Heart So Fierce and Broken. So I was about halfway through this book when I DNF'd it back in June, I believe, and I finally picked it back up again. I made myself read it, and honestly, I'm like glad I finished it, but I don't really know how I feel about it. I gave it 2.5 stars because I feel like that's a good midway for a book you don't know about, because it's exactly halfway between the 5 stars. So it's not necessarily a bad book, it's not necessarily a good book. I just don't know how I feel about this book. I didn't dislike it. There was nothing wrong with it. It was a fantasy book. It had war, it had magic, it had obviously a side plot of romance, it had multiple point of views. So like everything that I like in a fantasy book, but for some reason, I don't know, I just couldn't get invested. And I don't think this was to do with the fact that I DNF'd it, because obviously like I read the first book in the trilogy and then half of this one, and I wasn't invested because I DNF'd it. So I just really don't know how I feel about this series. I then obviously like I followed it up with the final book in the trilogy, which I gave 3 stars, so I liked it a little better. I don't know what it was about this series, because this had a thing that I don't like, and by the time you got to the end of the book and then by the time you got to the end of this book, you kind of understand why, and I disliked it less. So it wasn't even necessarily that. I just really don't know how I feel about these books. I think the main problem is I just didn't connect with any of the characters, and I don't know if that's me personally, because we did get like a lot of info on them, but some of them annoyed me a lot of the times. Like they made stupid decisions, and I was like, you should just communicate with each other and get over your stupid pride and everything would go a lot better, and we wouldn't have had like 3 books. It could have resolved in 2, but it wasn't, and that does kind of annoy me. I don't at all like when people can't communicate, especially when they're adults. It's like, it's the same in movies or TV shows. If people cannot communicate, like the miscommunication trope, I hate it. You're an adult, just communicate, just use your words, just be mature. But I guess these people, they were only like 18, so they were younger than me, which is crazy to think about. I remember when I was reading books about 18-year-olds, we were like, oh my god, they're so old, and now it's like, oh, those young little babies. But I would honestly recommend them. I gave the first book in the series, I gave it to my sister because I'm going to be unhauling these. I didn't like them enough to keep them, and it is a shame because I think the cover's so beautiful, like especially these spines. I don't know if you can see, but they are gorgeous, but I just didn't like it, so I will be unhauling them. But yeah, I gave her the first book because I do think it was more a case of the book wasn't for me rather than the book wasn't good. Because like I said, I did give it 2.5 and 3 stars, so that means they weren't bad books, they just weren't for me. And they are a Beauty and the Beast retelling, at least the first one is. I'd say these ones less, because obviously you can't really stretch out the Beauty and the Beast story into 3 books. I don't know, I really expected to like these more than I did, and I just wasn't the biggest fan. So yeah, I would recommend these though. If you are looking for, I'd say this is like younger readers. If you are just looking for like an easy breezy fantasy trilogy, then I'd say this is one for you. Okay, next off we read Equal Rights, and again, I really messed up my ratings this month because I rated this at 3 stars, which is the same as I rated A Vow So Bold and Deadly, but I like this more. Like, I know how I feel about it, so this is actually probably going to be a 3.5 stars. Let me modify that. There we go. case you can tell, I'm a very indecisive person. But yeah, so this was a 3.5 star read. This was literally like so short. It's probably the shortest book that I read all year. I did enjoy it, honestly. It was a good book, and I do like Terry Pratchett's style of writing. I feel like nowadays a lot of the books I read, authors don't necessarily have a almost sarcastic style of writing, but I do like when the author, how do I say this? When the author has a personality in a book. You know what I mean? Because sometimes you have like the main characters who have a personality, and that is great, but then the author themselves, like the writing style is just kind of generic. But that's not a bad thing, obviously, because it is the characters that you read in the book for, not the author. But I do also like when like the author or the narrator, like the external narrator or whatever it is, they have a kind of personality, and I don't know how to describe it. You'd have to have read Terry Pratchett's books or someone who writes similar to know what I'm talking about, I feel. But I really enjoyed this. It was 200 pages. I read it in like 2 hours. I read this as part of the 24-hour reading challenge. So I think it took me like 2.5 hours to read. This is a good, if you want to stick to fantasy but you want to broaden your, within the genre of fantasy, you want to read more diversely, this would be a good one, because I think this came out in like the 80s. Wait a second, was it the 80s or was it the 90s? This book was originally published in 1987, so if you want to read slightly older fantasy books but that I personally think are still good, then Terry Pratchett is definitely someone I would recommend. I didn't expect to like it as much as I did going in, but I think it's also, again, a good like fantasy palette cleanser. If you want a palette cleanser but you don't want to leave the fantasy genre, then just little books like this I think are really good, because they're so short and they're standalone, so you don't have to have a big commitment to it. It's not like a series or anything. But I really enjoyed this. It was a 3.5 stars. Like, it was nothing wow. I think it was just a really good, decent, easy book, and it's just so good. It's so small. It's like, it's a mini paperback. So it's also like really good if you want to go on holiday and just bring a small book with you. Then Equal Rights is definitely it. But yeah, I really like this. I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. And no, it might make me pick up other Terry Pratchett books, especially like I said, if I want a quick and easy palette cleanser type read. So who knows, maybe I'll read some more books by Terry Pratchett. So next off I read You Rich Sam, which I gave to my sister because I wasn't the biggest fan. I gave it 2.5 stars because, again, I just didn't know how I felt about it. I went into it expecting it to be absolutely devastating. I expected to cry, for it to make me really sad, and it was not that. It was not that at all. I didn't cry. I had one moment where my eyes got a bit watery, but even then, like, I feel like that was pushing things. Like, my brain was like, this book's supposed to make you cry, come on, cry, cry, cry. And I didn't. So it was a 2.5 stars. So again, that's a mid rating. 2.5 is not necessarily a bad book. It's just a book that I'm fairly neutral about. Like, I didn't love it and I didn't hate it. But I gave it to my sister, so who knows, maybe she'll like it more than I do. Honestly, I just felt like the premise was really interesting, but it didn't go far enough. I feel like the author could have done so much more with the idea, which is basically like a girl's boyfriend dies, and a few weeks after she calls his phone just to hear like his voicemail, to hear his voice, and he picks up, and so like they can then communicate through the telephone. And I think you could have done more with that, and I just felt like, and again, this is obviously, when people die you don't always get a perfect goodbye, because sometimes death is unexpected. And so in that aspect, the fact that even though they could talk at the end, I personally felt like their goodbye was lacking. I guess that's realistic in a way, and I don't know. I guess it's one of those books, like, if I had written it, I would have done it differently. But I also, like, I see the author's choices, I just don't, it wasn't really for me. I don't know. When I read it, I wanted to read a sad book. I was in the mood. You know how sometimes you're in the mood to just read a book that's gonna make you cry, because you just need to cry and you want a reason to do it, and you're like, a book is as good a reason as any. Well, this book didn't do that for me, so I was very disappointed. All in all, I don't think it's a bad book. I think it was the author's first book as well, and I feel like you could tell. I personally thought there were times when the writing was a bit, like, the dialogue was a bit weird, I found. But anyway, it's not a bad book. Again, it's a short book. I think it was about just over 200, maybe 230 pages. It's a quick and easy book, and maybe other people would read it and be absolutely devastated and in tears, but me personally, and I don't know if that says more about me or more about the book, but I just wasn't that affected. I didn't feel that connected to the main character Julie or the dead boyfriend Sam, so it was really hard to like get emotional with a book where you're not invested in the characters. It just wasn't really hitting for me. So next up, we finally got out of like the curse of the 2.5 to 3.5 books, because that was 4 books in a row where the highest rating was 3.5, so we were clearly, you know, we were struggling, we were not going through the best books on my TBR. That is Cold Coffee. And then I picked up Calabasas by R.F. Kuang, and if you know me here, you know how I feel about R.F. Kuang. You know that I absolutely love her. I've read Babel and Yellowface by her, and they were some of my favourite books. They're both 5-star reads for me. Well, Calabasas is it continues in that trend. I did give it a 4.5, but I do think, like Babel, when I first read Babel, I think it was also 4.5, and then like a few months after, because I just kept thinking about it in a really positive way, I was like, okay, this is a 5-star read. There is a chance that in a couple months I will change this to a 5-star read. I really, really, really like this book. So yeah, so the end of the month was a lot better than the beginning of the month. This book, honestly, again, for its size, I read it quite quickly. I did read half of it in the 24-hour reading challenge, and I just loved it. It was definitely an RF crying book, 100%. You could feel her writing style in it, and I love her writing style. I do think she also is kind of sarcastic, but her it's more in a sly way. I think that's like a word. It's kind of like sneaky, like the author's kind of like pointing a finger and like, you, this book is about you. I feel like this is kind of what R.F. Kuang's books are like, in that she's making commentary on society. And even though a lot of her books, or at least Calabasas and Babel, are both historical and set in different universes because they have magic, I do think she's making a commentary on current society with them, and I think it's so well done. I gave this book 4.5 stars, like I said at the beginning, and honestly, this book was really, really good. I actually was shocked. I did not expect, because both Yellowface and Babel, they didn't have any romance plot. In Babel, there was kind of a sort of maybe something going on that never actually happened, and in this book I fully expected there not to be, and then it surprised me there was. So I was very happy about that. I will say, yeah, because of the expectations I had from reading Babel, this book was even better, if that makes sense. No spoilers, but basically just something happened and I was like, yeah, that's such an R.F. Kuang move. The same thing happened in Babel, and then something else happened and you were like, whoa, didn't expect that. That is completely not what I thought would happen after what just happened. Like, I can't really describe it without going spoilers, but read the book and you might understand. But I really enjoyed this. I thought it was really good. It was really interesting. It was again a kind of like adventure book, because she's journeying through hell. Our main character Alice and then Peter are journeying through hell to try and save their professor. I greatly enjoyed it. I was not at all disappointed, and honestly, I know I gave it 4.5, but it's definitely going to become a 5 stars, and it might be a new favourite. I'm trying to think, will this overtake Babel and Yellowface? Who knows? I'll get back to you guys in a couple months and we'll see if this becomes my new favourite R.F. Kuang book. But as it is, I really enjoyed this and I would highly recommend it. We ended off the month in a really good way. So I finally picked up Magnolia Parks, and I was not disappointed. I was so worried going into this because I had seen very mixed opinions. There were people who absolutely loved it, and then there were people who did not like it at all, because it obviously has a trope that a lot of people don't like. I personally was worried because I don't like that trope either. I really liked this book. I thought it was so good. I absolutely adore Jessa Hastings' writing style. I think she writes books so well, and I think the way she like writes the main character's thoughts is so beautiful, and it was the same in Never, which was another book I read of hers. I just think her writing style is absolutely beautiful. It's really magical and lyrical and poetic. I'm a huge fan. But I read the first book and I did want to continue the series, but I wanted to do it in a reading vlog, and seeing as I was on holiday, I wasn't going to do a reading vlog on holiday because I was with my family and everything. So I put it off. I have not read the rest of the books in the series, which is not easy because this book doesn't exactly like end well. So I will be probably doing a reading vlog for this series because I really enjoyed the first one, and so I'm pretty sure I'm going to enjoy the rest of them. But yeah, so I'll be picking those up probably sometime this month or next month. I actually cannot wait because I love them so much. But yeah, I gave this book 4.5 stars. I loved it. Our main characters, when people told me that BJ and Magnolia were messy, they were not lying. They are messy, and at times, probably because I'm just not used to reading books where the two main characters, like, because I wouldn't necessarily say this is a romance, because the two main characters, they are together at a point in the book, but then it's not like a healthy romance. It's a very toxic romance. That was definitely interesting because I'd never really read a book like that before. I do think Jessa Hastings writes toxic relationships so well, with the nuance that like sometimes you're lacking in other books. I absolutely adored this book. I thought it was so good. Honestly, the trope that people don't like, I personally didn't find it a problem because we don't see it happen in the book. It's referenced as something that had happened in the past. So like, I think it was 2 or 3 years before the events of this book. So I feel like it bothered me less because I wasn't like seeing it live, if you will. I was just reading about it in flashbacks. As it was, I didn't find it that problematic. So if people worried going in that they're not gonna like it because of that, I would say I was worried too and it didn't really bother me. But again, to each their own. I know some people who absolutely will not read anything with that trope, and that's fair. That's very fair. But this one doesn't happen in the book. It happens before the book, if that can like make you feel a bit better about reading it. I love this book. I cannot wait to continue the rest of the series to get into this universe, and I just know that I'm going to be so obsessed by the end of the series, and I'm going to be very destroyed by BJ and Magnolia's story. And then the last book that I read this month was The Conditions of Will, also by Jessa Hastings, because I stopped myself from reading Magnolia Parks, but I still wanted like that Jessa Hastings hit. So I know she's done 2 other books. One is Times of Our Life, Times of Your Life, something like that, and then The Conditions of Will. And I felt like Times of Your Life is supposed to be part of a series, and I didn't want to get nevered again where I read a book thinking it was going to be standalone, only to discover that it's part of a planned series. So Conditions of Will is normally a standalone, and the story got all wrapped up, and so I was like, okay, we're going to read that one. Didn't really know what to expect because I know it deals with religion and stuff a little bit, which you can tell from like the front cover, but I really enjoyed this book. I think it was honestly my favourite Jessa Hastings book I've read so far. I gave it 5 stars. I really liked it. I don't know if it was the fact that like for once I read a Jessa Hastings book but everything got wrapped up nicely at the end. That was refreshing compared to Never and Magnolia Parks, which obviously like first books in series. I love this book. I did not expect to like it so much, which is weird because I did really like Never and I did really like Magnolia Parks, so I shouldn't have been surprised, but it was a 5-star book for me. I don't know why, but like every single element of that book was just what I needed in that moment. It was just hitting perfectly. Also, the main character, so the main romantic pair, what would that be called? Like our main female, main male character who end up together at the end, it was not a toxic relationship. It was a healthy relationship. And I was really surprised. I was like, what do you mean Jessa Hastings is writing a book about a healthy relationship? But to be fair, the main character, the main female character, did have then a kind of toxic relationship with her family. So there was still a toxic relationship within the story. It was just so hard to put down. I was just, I don't know, I was addicted. I really liked our main couple. I thought they were a really mature couple, because a lot of the time romance books, I feel, either because I'm reading romance books destined for younger audiences, or because I guess that helps generate drama and you're not just going to write a book of characters meet, characters fall in love, everything goes well, because that's just not as interesting as books with conflict or drama. But I feel like a lot of the romance books I have read, sometimes the drama is caused because people are acting in a way that I feel is immature. Like I said, miscommunication, just not being an adult, that kind of stuff. And so I felt like the main character in The Conditions of Will were actually like really mature and adult. Like they communicated, they talked to each other about stuff, they were honest with their feelings, they were just there for each other, and I really like that. Was really refreshing in a romance book, especially a Jessa Hastings romance book. So if you're not sure about Jessa Hastings books because you don't want to read about toxic couples, then The Conditions of Will is definitely a good one to start with, because they're actually like a healthy couple. I don't know, that book was just perfect to me. There you go. We have our 9 books that I read this month. I'm hoping in the month of January I will read even more books than that. I like to get back to regularly reading 9 or 10 books every month, because that's just where I'd like to be at to get through my TBR, to read as many books as possible, which is always my goal. But yeah, this was honestly, again, it was kind of a mid reading month. I did finish off the month on 3 really good books, but then the rest of the month I was kind of mid about what I was reading. Like I said, the highest was 3.5 stars, which isn't that high, so it was kind of mid-month. But hopefully this month it'll be even better. We are hoping that every month gets better and better and I read better books. But yeah, I still had a really good month. I'm very happy with how much I read. Even the books I didn't like, I'm happy I read them, because then I got them off my TBR and I finally knew if I liked them or not. So obviously the ones I didn't like I will be unhauling. I don't really keep books that I didn't like because there was just no point to it. I have enough books and I do not have enough space for all my books, so I'm not going to keep books that I don't like and they're just going to be taking up space for nothing. But yeah, honestly I had fun. It was good to recap these books, kind of talk about how my feelings. I always like doing this kind of thing because it helps me also. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you guys also had a great reading month, ended off the year with a bang, and I will say have a lovely week, and I will see you next Friday for our next video. Bye.